Live. Welcome everyone. I'm so excited to meet with you all today. I have the beautiful Shalini. She's here with me, and we will be diving into tax prep and all of your tax questions. And I know it's a frustrating time for many, so we're going to try to remove some of that stress and give you a little bit more peace of mind. And I'm excited to dive into these featured expert lives, because these are the pieces that I've been wanting to do for a while, and it takes a bit to get them going, but this is what this community is for. It's bringing us together. It's sharing all of our insight and intel and expertise with everyone else, because we're all business owners and we are not the expert at everything. So it's great to have those that are really amazing in their zone of genius to come and highlight their skill set and share with us, any tips and tricks and insight and just their expertise with us. So I'm really excited to get this going. And at the end of this live that Shalini is going to be putting together, if you have any questions, I'll try to check through the chat group as well. And if you're coming and joining us live, we'll get you to ask your questions live as well. But let's get started. So I'm going to do a brief intro, and then we will get right to Shalini and her amazingness. So welcome. So happy to have you here. Shalini, how are you?
I'm good. It's tax season, so, busy, but tax season is supposed to be stressful for me, not for you guys. So
I love that. So, and it's Shalini, correct? I want to make sure I'm doing Shalini. Oh, see, I knew I was getting it wrong. Shalini, thank you. So Shalini is a certified accountant, and she is the doctor of your finances. She believes in a holistic strategy is especially important for small business owners. Your business and personal needs are so intertwined. It all starts with education. So educating you to set up systems, processes, and apply tax and wealth strategies to make sure your hard-earned money is working for you. So I'm so excited to hear what you have for us. I know we'll be diving into, are you ready for taxes and the main woes, and we're here for it. We're excited for it. And I love that the viewers will be able to leave knowing exactly how to do your bookkeeping for taxes and what you need to prepare for your accountant. So be sure to bring your questions, guys, and get ready, have your favorite drink, and let's dive in. So welcome. Go ahead and kind of introduce yourself better than I did. And the floor is yours.
So as you said, my name is Shalini. I'm a chartered professional accountant, and I work exclusively with small business owners, and I help them not just file their taxes, but actually help them understand all the do's and do nots of running a small business from an accounting and tax perspective. Maria, you do the marketing stuff. I don't go there, but, very similar to how you would say, you can't have a business without having that brand strategy and kind of knowing, what you're supposed to do and how to execute it. Same thing I do for taxes and accounting. So many business owners, they go into business, they want to offer a product or they want to offer their skill set. And then all of a sudden it's like, surprise, you have all this compliance and there's taxes, but it's not just taxes, there's accounting and something called financial statements, and I have to numbers. I hated math in school. Why do I have to look at numbers? And the mistake that a lot of business owners make is that they then put blinders up to these things because it's not in their comfort zone. They've never been educated on do's and do nots. And unfortunately, in my profession, a lot of people feel they're being talked at instead of talked to. They go to an accountant who says a lot of gibberish that they don't understand, and it's a sign here, okay, see you next year, and here's my tax bill for the year. And so that is my personal mission, has been to change that narrative with your accountant, with your financial person, because nobody wants to feel that way about their numbers. And if you're not comfortable asking questions, you're not going to be able to grow and thrive as an entrepreneur.
I love that you're sharing that. And it's so true. I feel like as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we should be able to have the base knowledge of what's required to run a sustainable business. And we tend to just have, okay, here's my logo, here's my product, let's just go run and make money. And that's amazing. That's a great way to start. But you'll soon see that you need to have certain foundations in place to let things run smoothly and efficiently and effectively. And knowing your numbers is a necessity. It's an absolute must. And it's one of those things that I know that it wasn't my favorite thing to do. That's why I went to drawing pictures and not the number part. But I needed to know how to do it, right? And you're so right in saying that. A lot of the times you don't know what to do. You don't know how to do it. And I think getting the right person to show you the way and be your guide is absolutely imperative. It's essential. And that's something that I've done early on. And then as every phase, as you scale and grow, it gets even more and more challenging. So you'll really need to have someone who knows their shit, that knows what they're talking about, to be able to guide you and help you. So I'm so glad that you're here today to dive into this with us. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. And, tax season often brings up a lot of these feelings of anxiety, of stress, and a lot of it is truthfully because you're probably just doing a year's worth of bookkeeping right before your taxes. So then it becomes, where did I put that receipt? And what do I do with this? And do I take out the HST? Do I not take, like, all of these questions? And when you don't feel in control of the process, you're gonna have a lot of negative feelings towards the entire thing, right? And so with taxes, having a good system in place year round is vital to making tax season less stressful. And if you're worried about paying taxes, we live in a country where you're gonna pay taxes. That's kind of a reality of living in Canada. And paying taxes also means that you made money, right? Which is the goal, to make money. But we want to minimize that. We want to strategize around that. And so that's just where, having those people in your pocket that you can talk to about things as you grow and as your situation changes is key.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just reading through the comments on the live, and Sarah's saying that she feels attacked. and I don't think Sarah's alone, because it's so true. Like, when I used to do it for myself, one of my goals was to get a bookkeeper and accountant. Like, that was one of my business goals, because that stack would sit there, and every Friday in the morning was my input and get your accounting done and get your bookkeeping done and make sure that it's complete. And that pile would stack and stack and stack because there was no desire to get it completed. And then you would get to it, and then you would just crush it in like 2 or 3 days and go through it all, and it was a vicious cycle. So, we're definitely feeling this and hearing this, and definitely make it a priority to get someone to help you with that. Like, for me, it was just like having someone who knows what they're doing and categorizing and putting everything in. And I just email my receipts and take pictures of things, and I can just remove this part of my brain and give it to someone else. It feels amazing. So absolutely.
That you kind of hit the nail on the head when you've hired somebody who wants to do bookkeeping, right? Like, not a lot of people want to do bookkeeping, but when you outsource the task, you can outsource the task. You cannot outsource the responsibility. I need to make that perfectly clear. You need to review the numbers. You need to review what that bookkeeper is doing. So you need to be conversational enough to be able to ask certain questions. But if you don't want to look at your financial statements, you kind of also have to ask yourself why. There's the tax element, and we're going to get into taxes, I promise. But your financial statements, your profit and loss, it's going to tell you so much about what's working, what's not working. And that's how you use that to actually grow your business. Looking at the profitability. You're in marketing, so what's the return on the investment? How are things actually producing for you? But every single expense line that you are putting money into, you should be asking, what is the return on my investment in this particular thing? I'm just going to hold on. Let me just close my door. Just 2
You're good. And that's valid too. When you think of every expense that you're putting in your business, is it legitimate, and is it worth the money that you're putting in and the return that it's going to give? So yeah, definitely continue with that.
Yeah. So like typically we break down our expenses into, front office, back office. That's the general terminology. Front office being the sales oriented. Is it actually bringing you in customers? And then the back end being the more administrative. It keeps your business going. And people focus so much on the front end. We're putting money into our campaigns. We're putting money into our paid advertising, sales reps, employees that are actually working for us. But the back office is actually where a lot of times the expenses get not forgotten, but you forget that you're paying for that subscription. And every single month it's just auto renewing. And it's like, when's the last time you used that? Or, and I am personally guilty of this, you buy the course and you have every intention of doing the course. And then a year goes by and you're like, well, I paid for this course and I still haven't even logged in to said course. Right. And so that is where you can start identifying some expenses that maybe you don't need and can then be repurposed. Or even within the front end sales, being able to say, like, I once had a client and the bookkeeper was just putting everything under advertising as a lump sum. And then when I broke it down into Facebook ads, Google ads, and like the specific, we realized like most of your traffic is coming from like Facebook ads, but you're spending all this money on Google ads. Why? Why not repurpose that to where your customers are actually coming from? So your financial statements are a conversation. Like they're going to help you drive the conversation of what's working. So if you're only doing your bookkeeping for tax reasons, you're missing an entire opportunity to really understand where your money is going. And so in my CFO world, I do a lot of cash flow management. These are the types of things that we look at. It's not just, okay, you made a profit, here's how much taxes you owe. That's an element of running your business. But your financial statements are really going to show you, for every dollar that you're bringing in, what is it doing for you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's a gold mine of data that you should really pay attention to. And we forget because we're stuck on autopilot. We're like, okay, these are the things I'm doing. These are the things that my business absolutely needs. But have you ever done an inventory to see, does it really need that? Like that teachable subscription that's like $500 a year. Are you using it? Is it actually working? Like all of those subscriptions, there's so many of them. And when I like do website design, everything is in US dollars for me too. And that's a question I'll have for you moving forward. But it's one of those things like that's a big chunk of change. I think it's one of those things that if you don't pay attention to it, it will run you. And that's not what we want to have to happen. So when you have your accountant or bookkeeper who's actually strategically thinking of the bigger forecast of your business, that plays a vital role in your business success and sustainability. So I love that you're really paying attention to the numbers and diving deeper with them in that. So I think that's wonderful.
And that also comes back down to, what are you paying for, right? So if you're just paying someone for tax filing, yeah, they will take whatever your financial statements are and plop it into a tax return and be like, here's your tax liability. And that is what the majority of people this time of year are looking for. They just need to get it done, take it off their to-do box, get CRA off their back, and make sure they have enough money in the bank to make their bills. But this is where there's so much more to your financials than just tax filing. But since it is tax season, I thought we would maybe deviate a little bit more to tax filing. We can do another session on the CFO element of knowing your numbers and what to look for and how to analyze them. But I know everybody here kind of wants to talk about tax season because that's where we are at.
Absolutely.
So the biggest question that I always get, or like the biggest, I think, stressor for a lot of people is, what do I need to give you again? What is it that I like? What am I supposed to do? Just tell me, give me a checklist. What is it that I need to give you? And I would say, start with what you prepared last year. Odds are, if you had it last year, you have it this year. So think of all the different ways that you earned income. And from an expense perspective, you kind of need to know what's a business expense versus the personal expense. And this is where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle, because as an entrepreneur, there are certain things that you write off in specific places, and that makes the entire process a little bit more confusing. So for the entrepreneur itself, your profit and loss is going to be specifically related to your business. So whatever revenue is specifically relating to running your business, what you invoice to the clients, and the expenses are going to be directly related to earning that revenue. So the question to ask yourself is, if I didn't have a business, but I worked somewhere, would I still have this expense? And if you would still have that expense, odds are it's not a business expense and probably belongs somewhere else on your tax return. So I'll give you an example, childcare, right? Yes, you need to have someone watch your child to be able to work. I have a nanny, that's why I had to close the door because she was vacuuming while he's napping. But if I worked somewhere else, I would still have to have someone watch my child. I could not work. So while childcare is a deduction on your taxes, it is not a business write-off, right? And this is where a lot of people get really confused, because they know that things go into their taxes. They just don't really necessarily understand where. So your self-employment, freelancer, independent contractor, small business owner, whatever you want to call it, that is specifically the revenue and the expenses related to earning that revenue. Advertising, office expense, subscriptions, my fees, all those things are business expenses. And then other things, if they are eligible to be written off, they go elsewhere in your tax return. And this is where you need to ask your accountant, how do you want me to give you this information? So, you know, RRSP slips, you usually scan them and send them to your accountant. Medical, in the world of virtual, a lot of people are just giving me a grand total of how much they spent on medical instead of scanning to me 50 documents, right? Because it's just easier to do that. So talk to your accountant, preferably before tax season, about what their systems and processes are, because you're going to be expected to follow those.
I love how you broke it down, and is if I'm working in corporate or like, you know, the real world, which this is my real world, but anyways, if you're working in corporate or at a different business, you know, childcare, I would need it regardless. So I love how you just broke that down black and white, because it's true. If I work anywhere else, I still need someone to mind the kids or someone to take care of them, or a nanny, or what it may be. So that just goes under the personal portion of your taxes and not the business side of things. So that makes complete sense. And that's pretty crystal clear. And then anything that we use in relation to growing the business, scaling the business, making the business run, then those are the deductible expenses that go towards it. And of course, there's, you know, a couple nuances here and there, but that really makes it clear as day as if I'm working regularly, what does that look like? And do I need these things? And like, you know, your car and things like that, unless you're, and that's a question I have too about the cars, and we can dive into that too. But it absolutely makes sense in regards to how to break it down. And then the part you mentioned about the medical slips, it's like, yeah, do they want all these 60 different little tags and receipts, or do they want the total? I'm assuming they would want the total, but yeah, no, that's definitely ask your accountant how they want it delivered, because you know what, some people might be different. Some people might want you to give them the 60 receipts, but you know, but in regards, you should still have copies of those, I'm assuming, to make sure, just in case, that you have everything documented.
Well, and you still need to keep the supports, right? So when you actually file your taxes, what actually gets submitted to CRA, there's no support. So we don't upload those slips. We don't give them any supporting documentation. So you are still responsible to maintain and keep all those slips. But I, as the accountant, do not necessarily need them. And I don't keep all my clients' information for years and years and years. It's your responsibility as the business owner and the taxpayer to keep your slips. So in a case of an audit, I would be like, okay, you just need to pull out XYZ slips. That's what they're looking for. So it's just, the world of virtual, the days of dropping off a giant Ziploc bag or shoebox full of receipts is kind of gone. it's also just more easier for the taxpayer to put in a grand total versus scanning, and then it becomes, oh, that picture isn't clear. Can you retake it? Or there's so many little nuances when it comes to online too.
I agree. And it's oddly enough, we had higher medical expenses a few years just for my daughter, and she has like a back brace and it's very expensive. And we did get audited. So I did have to have all of the medical receipts, and I had to scan every single file. And so I made a copy, and I just mailed it off to the CRA and said, here you go. And they came back and they went through like, yep, nope, it's legit. So like sometimes they just want to make sure, because like if it's not the norm and all of a sudden there's like a heavy increase or a big price change or amount change, then it flags the system automatically, I'm assuming. So I did have to have those documents and send them over. So I can attest to, yes, keep all of your files.
You need to. I mean, as a business owner and taxpayer, you actually need to keep everything for 6 years anyways, right? They have up to 6 years to audit you. And a lot of people will ask, well, what do I need to do to not get audited? It's like, well, that if I could predict who's going to be audited and who's not going to be an audit, I'd be a multimillionaire, right? There's an element of random selection, but then there are some CRA red flags, and having a higher medical bill, for example, is one of those, because they see, right? Like everything is electronic, everything is in their CRA database. They can kind of gauge what the average household is spending on certain things. And so, yes, sometimes it's just a matter of, hey, you've got a really big number here. It's gonna probably get flagged for an audit, but that doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that, you're gonna get thrown into CRA jail. They're just gonna ask for the supporting documentation. You send it to them. It's inconvenient, yes, but it's not something to be feared, as long as you know that you're doing everything on the up and up.
Yes, absolutely. And it is kind of nerve-wracking when you receive that letter, but it's like, oh, but I have, like, if you stay organized, it is just so much easier for your life. So always keep everything organized, keep things labeled. I just have different folders with all the receipts in it. So if I have to go back to it, I do have access, and I have them by year. And in that instance, I'm so glad that I did have it, because it was actually really easy, besides photocopying everything and sending them the whole package, which was annoying. But in the end, they're like, yep, everything's accounted for, you're good. So that's the thing too, as a business owner, I always want to do things correctly, and indirectly, I might not be doing it correctly, right? So that's where obviously having the proper guide, when someone can give you the foundational of, okay, here's the categories you should be using. These are the common things that you have as expenses. These are the common things for taxes that you will require. It just keeps you year after year. And I like that you made that point too. What you did last year is a good example of what to look forward to this year. And it's a good comparison to pay attention to those numbers. So, let's dive deeper. What other help can you provide to us in this scenario for taxes?
Well, when it comes to business expenses specifically, the CRA categories are examples of the type of expenses that the typical business owner would have, right? And so a lot of people get really fixated on picking the right category. And the bottom line is, CRA doesn't care. CRA doesn't care as long as it's a legitimate business expense, and B, not one of the areas that maybe has specific rules around it. And those three categories are meals and entertainment, business use of home, business use of vehicle. They have specific criteria and different tax treatments in those three categories, but all the other ones are fair game, 100% write-offs. And so it doesn't matter if you picked the right category, because revenue minus expenses equals your profit. Whether that's revenue minus advertising or revenue minus office expense, doesn't matter. Those categories really and truly are more for you, the entrepreneur, to understand where your money is going. So my advice to you, when you're looking at your receipts and you're racking your brain of like, well, this could go here, but it could also go there. Yeah, it probably could go in both places. So, my favorite example is web hosting. Some people see web hosting as an office expense. I have a business, I got to have a website. Some people see it as an advertising expense. I wouldn't even have a website if I wasn't trying to promote myself. Where do you as the business owner want to see that expense? So that when you're looking at your profit and loss and analyzing where your money is going, where do you want to see it? So, you know, in the beginning of the year, when you maybe make a budget, which budget do you want it to come out of? And the only thing that you need to ask yourself as you're going through those receipts are, is this a legitimate business expense or not? And so that brings up a whole thing of, well, so what can I write off as an entrepreneur? The short answer is it has to have a direct correlation to you earning income. But also, it has to be something that the average person would not need as part of their employment. What does that mean? So my favorite, if I could see the live, I would actually ask this question. And are there people watching us live for me to ask this question? Okay, so before I answer this, for those of you that are live, what do you think is my number one question that entrepreneurs ask if they can write off? That everybody wishes they could write off? Just put it in the chat. I'm actually going to try to log in so I can see. Or Maria, tell me if anybody actually bothers to answer this question.
Yeah,
But
I will.
what is the favorite thing that entrepreneurs want to write off? And so before I answer that question, the question that you need to ask yourself, like I said, is if you didn't have a business, would you still have that expense? And if the answer is yes, you would still have that expense. Odds are it's not directly related to your business. So how does this expense help you earn income? The other one that I love to ask people is, if you had staff, if you had an employee, would you reimburse them for that expense? And if the answer is no, if they have to take care of that on their own, then how are you, the entrepreneur, justifying writing it off? So did anybody answer? Any comments in the? No? Okay, then I'm going to tell you guys. My number one question that people love to ask me is, can I write off my clothes? Can I write off my hair, my makeup? You know, I have to look a certain way as the face of my business. And the answer is no. CRA has pretty strong guidelines on this, that any personal use items, clothes, hair, makeup, stuff that you would potentially do if you had a corporate job, for example, are not deductible. So as a business owner, you cannot write off whatever you want. It has to have a direct correlation to running your business, and it has to be something that is justifiable, as in, you know, a corporate executive is required to look a certain way. They have to buy suits, or they can't expense that. So the term is personal use items. Your own consumption of things is not a deduction for tax purposes.
So that was a question. So actually someone did reply, I just had to hit refresh, and they mentioned meals, right? So like we all have to eat. But I think I think I know the stipulation, but obviously I'd love to hear it from you, what you think is the best answer to give for writing off meals and expenses towards meals and entertainment.
Absolutely. So meals and entertainment is one of those areas that has a specific criteria behind it. And so for tax purposes, meals and entertainment is only 50% deductible. You're still going to give me the 100% number because this is an adjustment that gets done within the tax return itself. But the justification behind it is that you are a human being, you need to eat, but that other person's meal, the client's meal, the potential referral partner, the, you know, whomever you are treating, their meal is an expense to help you earn income. You are wooing that client, or you're saying thank you for your business. That person's meal is deductible. So for meals and entertainment, only 50% is deductible because of that whole personal use element of, well, you have to eat. So even if you know, I get this a lot. Well, I was out all day, so I had to buy lunch. Okay, but when you worked, you know, downtown Toronto and you forgot your lunch at home, did your boss give you a meal allowance, or did you go down to the path and buy your meal and pay for it out of pocket? Right? So it's the same kind of logic. And a lot of people are like, but I'm the business owner, I should get to write off whatever I want. And the reality is that's not the way it works.
That's so valid. And for me, I also think, you know, is it networking? Is it, you know, a networking event that you're attending? Is it business related? Like, you know, it's always something to consider, like, are you speaking about business for business during that? Like, I take it, it's funny because like I always want to be by the book. So I'm very meticulous about these things. And it's like, if this is something related to my business, if I'm networking, if I'm about to hire someone, if I'm scoping, if, you know, anything for me to travel or go do the thing for my business, to me, that's a business expense. If I'm just doing it to go meet a friend and we're just having fun, that's not, right? Like, so it's just like knowing what the parameters are, helps. And that's why it's 50% anyways. You're right, because you're going to eat, but the person you're paying for, you didn't have to pay for them. Like, you're just, you know, saying, hey, we could potentially be working together, like just trying to smooth over or whatever. Like, it's definitely a form of entertaining for the purpose of gaining business or gaining trust or getting a referral partner or any of those things. So that makes complete sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, meals and entertainment is highly audited, right? So if meals and entertainment happens to be one of your largest expenses, be prepared for an audit. So when it comes to meals and entertainment, first of all, for any of your expenses, doesn't matter what the category, credit card and bank statements are not support for CRA purposes. So you have to have the original receipt that breaks down what you bought and the HST and all that fun stuff. But on that receipt, write down the name of who you met with. If they have a business card, maybe staple the business card behind it so that heaven forbid you get audited and they're questioning, who did you meet with? You can be like, oh yeah, I met with Shalini and we talked about accounting and taxes and all that fun stuff. Or I met with so-and-so and she is a referral partner and she's referred me business. So I treated her to lunch as a thank you for all the business, right? Documenting as much as you can when it's fresh in your mind will also very much help you. Heaven forbid you do get audited, because then you have your answers as opposed to, who did I go for lunch with? I don't remember what we talked about, right? Just documented while it's fresh in your mind.
I love that you share that. And that just makes me feel good. Cause like on the receipt, I'm like, we went out to lunch to discuss. Like I write the details on it because my brain is terrible. And I'm like, that makes sense. Or like who I went with or what it was for. It's always written at the top. That's just a habit that I've had from like way back when. So I'm like, okay, good. I'm on track. I'm doing the right thing. So that feels good to hear. So what are some other items that are like, you know, the biggest, you know, challenge you think for entrepreneurs when it comes to tax season?
I think understanding what's a business and personal, we've kind of talked about that a little bit. Managing the bookkeeping for a lot of people becomes very overwhelming. And my biggest advice to that is just try not to leave it till 2 weeks before, you know, you have to give everything to your accountant. And this is really hard for people because it's not necessarily their most fun task. So if you are going to be doing it yourself, build it into your calendar. You know, every single week, book a money date with yourself where you are taking your receipts and actually entering them into your systems, figuring out what your systems even are. So for me and my clients, I tell them to use a program called HubDoc, which has an app on your phone and it has an email address. So you can, you know, you go out to lunch, you take a picture of that receipt. You get an electronic invoice, you forward it to your HubDoc email. So everything is in one space. I call it my online shoebox, right? So use that system throughout the year. As soon as you get that email for an invoice, it should be second habit before you even reply to that thing to forward it to your HubDoc so that it's in your shoebox. And then set a money date. Just like you wouldn't negotiate with a client deliverable, try not to negotiate with your bookkeeping. Whether that is doing it yourself or making sure that it's in HubDoc to give it to the bookkeeper and then reviewing the reports. Hey, I spent a lot of money on blah, blah, blah this month. Where's the cash flow coming for it? Or where is the whatever going to come for it? So you can plan. But if you're doing it throughout the year, I do believe that come tax season, you're going to be so much more ahead of the game because your bookkeeping is done. You're literally just printing your profit and loss statement and waiting for all the other snail mail receipts to come in, and you give the file to your accountant. But bookkeeping is what stresses people out because now you're taking a year's worth of bookkeeping and trying to find time to do it. And we're all busy. We're all entrepreneurs. Do you have 2 days to give up, to dedicate to it when you have so many other things in your life to do? Or is it perhaps easier to book like 1 hour a week to just get the receipts entered or uploaded so that it's done?
That is some great advice, because I know we always try to have a devote day or devote time. And like I mentioned, my stacks kept on piling up, but being on top of your transactions, like for me now, because having systems in place is the best answer. And I agree with you on there. So, I'm going to share a couple and you tell me what you think are like some of the great apps or programs out there to help with the bookkeeping to keep you on track for tax time. But so I used to use Wave. That was like, it's a free service. I used to use Wave. I used to do all my journal entries and do all of the things on there. They even had a Wave receipt thing that you could take pictures of and it would upload it. So any type of bookkeeping rather than not having one, I think is a good idea. Like that would be my thing. But then as I was scaling and growing, I needed something a bit more robust, something that like now that I have US clients and international clients and I needed multiple accounts and multiple currencies and all of the things, I actually went over to Xero. And I know QuickBooks is another really good application as well. And I actually paid someone to set it up for me. So I paid a chartered accountant to set up my Xero for me because it was slightly different than Wave. And I always want everything to be set up correctly. So then I just need to mimic. Because basically when you're creating a data entry or a journal entry, you just like copy and then enter your new information and then hit save. And that's the easiest thing. As long as you have an example to follow that is done correctly, your life becomes easier. And now it's even easier because I have the bookkeeper. I'm like, and I use HubDoc. I love HubDoc. I'm like, I get my whatever receipt for whatever subscription, like SiteGround, forward to HubDoc. Like it's immediate, like it becomes automatic. And it's a beautiful thing because it doesn't have to sit in a pile in your brain or on your desk. You're handling the bookkeeping right away. So I wholeheartedly agree with everything you're saying, Shalini.
And so, coming back to systems, I mean, HubDoc is great. If you don't want to do HubDoc, in your inbox, make a 2023 at this point tax folder and start saving it into that folder so that you know that this is where everything is. The only downside with email folders is that if you have that physical receipt or the bank statements or whatnot, you can't necessarily save it there. So, whether you're using a Google Drive, Dropbox, keep a folder, and you want to make sure that you're putting all your invoices there if you're not using a proper software, and all your receipts and bank and credit card statements. I hate Wave. I hate FreshBooks. Thank you for not using them anymore, but they are free, or at least Wave is now free. FreshBooks is trying to be in the big kids and try to play with QuickBooks and Xero. So I think it still has a free version, but it also has paid versions. When you are setting up your books, there's something called a chart of accounts, which is what all the account names are basically called. My biggest advice is the main categories on your chart of accounts should be what we need for tax purposes. So every single person, doesn't matter what your business, what your industry, if you're a sole proprietor, we are all filling out the exact same schedule 2125. If you are incorporated, we're all filling out the exact same corporate tax return. And CRA actually has something called a Jiffy code, General Index of Financial Information. They have come up with code names, account numbers, and account names that they expect you to be providing them the information following. So set up your main accounts using the same terminology that the tax returns are going to need. But then use sub-accounts to track the level of detail that you need as the entrepreneur. So advertising is a great example of this. Yes, for tax purposes, it just says advertising, but the sub-accounts should be the lowest level of detail that you want to track. And this is going to be different per entrepreneur, but what is it that you're wanting to track at that minutia level? Use sub-accounts, and QuickBooks and Xero have that ability of sub-accounts. Wave does not. Wave's reporting functionality is very poor. And so yes, in the very, very beginning, when you might not be looking at your reports in as much detail, fine, but moving softwares is also sometimes quite cumbersome. So just set it up once for success. And then you don't have to worry about, oh, I got to transfer this and I got to reset this up and I have the receivable still in that program. How do I put the receivable now in this program? It can make it a little bit stressful when you switch accounting softwares.
I can 100% vouch for that. It was it was almost like it was a nightmare. Like it was really frustrating and all of the things. And then it was now a new learning curve, and like the way things were done one way, you have to do it a different way. So if you're starting and have nothing, definitely listen to what she's saying and go to Xero, go to QuickBooks, use the ones that are legit and give you the proper reports that you need. Absolutely visit like your government sites and see what their protocol is. What are the main categories they require you, like sales, 200, like whatever those categories are that they need you to have, make sure you have those. And then the little minute details. Someone told me once, it's like, do put it where you would logically put it, right? Because if you're going to be searching for something and you're like, oh, but that would be under like referral fee, or that I would put that under website development. I would put that. So if your brain thinks and knows that that's where you would put it, like a good accountant or bookkeeper, like, well, how would you categorize this and what makes sense, right? Like, so they would like what feels aligned. So it's easy for you to know where it would be resting, like on that journal entry. So those little subcategories, it's up to you and what makes your life easier to break it apart. Like she mentioned earlier, like if Google ads versus Facebook ads and how much you're spending, and you realize that I'm actually, all of my marketing is coming from Facebook ads. Why am I wasting so much money on Google ads? Let me dump it into Facebook. Like that is so valid. That's why you categorize it and break it down so you can see the cash flow and what's going in and out, and is it sustainable? Is it actually profitable for you to use it, and the ROI? So this has been amazing. Is there any other final points as we round up here? And also, if you guys have questions, I know there's a few joining live, drop them in the live. If there's anything that we didn't cover you want us to address, make sure you drop the questions in the chat and I'll go over and take a look. But yeah, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
No, I mean, like I said, tax season, there's a little bit of self-advocating that you need to do. So, understand what your sources of income are. So, if you're running a business, you're going to have your profit and loss. You have investments and you know that they're paying you money. You're expecting some T-slips, T3s, T5s. If you put money into your RSP, you're going to have an RSP slip. So typically anything that you need to put into your taxes has some sort of supporting documentation attached to it. There's a lot of credits and deductions available to Canadian taxpayers in general. So doing a little bit of research, for example, this year we have the staycation credit. Do you have the proper receipts? And I can tell you the majority of people coming to me, not for any fault of their own, but the receipt that was given to them does not have the details that CRA wants. And we're, as tax preparers, are like, we'll put it through, but just understand that if they audit you, this is missing XYZ detail, and you'll have to go back to that provider and get the information. But self-advocating, review your taxes, and this is going to sound like a stab at my own profession, but if they're not willing to take the time to walk you through your tax return, at least the summary of like, so this is all your sources of income. I have this from this from this. You're probably not getting your money's worth, because the person should take the time to say, this is where I captured all this from, and this is where this came from. And so your net number is this because of blah, blah, blah. And that takes time, right? It takes time and coordination between you and me. And that should be part of the service that you're looking for, because otherwise, if something is missed or if something was incorrectly entered, you're the taxpayer, you're the one that's going to deal with the repercussions of that. And yeah, I mean, there's checklists I will share with Maria, or I'll post some links of some free resources that I have to hopefully help anybody watching this be tax ready, as stress-free. I promise you, taxes are not meant to be stressful. You just need to have the systems in place. And the last thing that I'll just say before we go is that if you owe more than $3,000 in your 2022 tax bill, so whether it's income tax or HST, you need to make installments towards your 2023 taxes. And that one is missed a lot by people. So if you take a look at your total, you might end up having two payment plans. If you can't pay in full your 2022 taxes and you're paying that in installments, that could be one scenario for you, but then also your 2023 taxes installments need to be made. And so the magic number to look for there is $3,000, whether that's HST or income tax. You might need to make installments throughout the year. Just take a look at that bottom line, not the net refund or the net number, but the total payable will dictate that.
That last point you shared there, that happened to me this past season. So I had to, they're like, hey, you had a greater amount over 3,000 and it triggered the system. And then they wanted me to pay installments, but I'm like, but this year I'm not making as much as I did last year. So with the bookkeeper, we went through and found an actual accurate number of the installment that I should pay. And I did have to pay in, I believe it was October and December. I'm trying to remember. There was 2 time slots that I did have to pay installments for the next 2022 year, which I prepaid. So that's in your CRA as well. But this has been amazing, and like just so many valuable nuggets in regards to making sure you have your systems, making sure you have, keep on top of your bookkeeping. The differentiators between, is it personal or is it business expense, and what those categories are. Just like so many great insights here, because there is a lot of confusion surrounding it. So thank you for kind of nailing what those items are. There's a few comments saying, writing the details on the receipts is a great idea. Scanning all your documents or sending them to like a digital shoebox. It sounds like a PITA, but it's an amazing, process. Like at the end of the day, it makes complete sense. So like so much intel shared. These are just some of the comments. So I guess a couple of questions just to kind of ask, and then we can kind of round this out here is, so I love this one. It's like, how do I guarantee a refund? Being a solopreneur, I've never had a refund. So I would love to know the answer to this one.
Well, if any accountant guarantees you a refund, you run as fast as you can away from that person. We cannot guarantee refunds, right? So that is kind of a trick question, because you cannot guarantee that you're going to make a refund. You can minimize your tax bill, right? So making sure you're claiming all the expenses, maximizing your RRSP contributions. We're now going to have the first home savings account, if that's applicable in your situation, using those tools and credits. And this comes back to self-advocating. Are you claiming all the things that you could be eligible for? Will minimize your tax bill, but we can never guarantee you a refund. And frankly, you don't want a refund. A refund means that you've overpaid. A refund means, so typically there's 2 things that'll trigger a refund. Either you have overpaid your taxes, i.e. you made more in installments or more taxes were withheld at source, and so it's the government giving you back your money, or there were refundable tax credits that you were eligible for, right? The refundable tax credits, sure, we love those. Getting back our own money that we could have been investing and earning some interest on. You don't want the refund. You just want to make sure you're minimizing your tax bill.
I love the way you broke that down. That makes so much sense. And yes, you're right, because then they're just hijacking our money and taking it from us, and then just giving it back to us at the end of the year, which is like, nah, I'd rather hold on to it as long as I can. So this has been amazing. So how can people find you, reach you, all of the things, and absolutely share your resources with the community? I know you mentioned a checklist. Like, tell us a little bit about those things. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say either friend me on Facebook or follow me on Instagram. The handle is @DharnaCPA, and I do a lot of reels and tips for small business owners. Education is a huge part of my platform. And what I will share in the community is I have a free tax prep guide, which kind of for the entrepreneur helps them figure out all the different things to get together. I have another resource called CRA Red Flags, which talks about all the things that CRA tend to look at and how to avoid them. And I also have a tax prep masterclass that I launched this year. And that one is a paid resource, but if you actually do the class and then want to retain me for your taxes, I will credit you the cost of that masterclass to your invoice this year. So I will share all the goodies in the comments below, so that if you are interested in any of those things, by all means, let's connect.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise and removing a little bit of that stress when it comes to tax time. And it just, for myself, it's like, ooh, I'm giving myself little check marks and little pats on the back because I'm doing a couple things right. And it's good to check in to make sure that you are doing it correctly, right? And having a valuable resource like Shalini and her sharing her intel and her insights and the right and the incorrect ways to do things really makes sense, because if you don't do things right at the beginning, it's going to be a big pile up at the end and a big headache for everyone. And honestly, as an accountant, it will probably be a bigger bill if you don't take care of the small things along the way and hire a proper bookkeeper to keep an accountant to keep you on track. It's a lot more work to fix any mistakes and go through it all at the end. So it just makes sense to always know your numbers and stay on top of it. So thank you so much for joining today and sharing all your valuable insights with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing.